Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to the next Deep Purple video, where today we're talking about Mark II in the 1990s. So this is the third and final attempt to operate the classic lineup of the band. It's a very, very short-lived era. They only managed to muster up one studio album, and that is The Battle Rages On. I alluded to in the last video, I must admit, I am a pretty big fan of this album. I think it's really, really good. When you look into the circumstances under which this album was recorded, it doesn't make any sense as to why it's as good as it is. This should have been a complete and total disaster. But yeah, at least musically and artistically, I think it's very, very strong. One of the better reunion albums that features Richie on guitar, in my opinion. It didn't sell quite as well as one would have hoped, but yeah, like I said, the album as a statement, I think actually works really well. We'll talk more about that in a bit. For now, I will list the members one more time. So returning on lead vocals, we have Ian Gillan. Lead guitar, we've got Richie Blackmore. Organ and keyboards, we have John Lord. Bass, we have Roger Glover. And on drums, we have Ian Pace. So, like I said, a very, very short-lived period of the band. Gillan comes in late 92, and by late 93, Blackmore leaves in a fit of rage. So, yeah, without a doubt, this is the most dysfunctional period in the band's history. I can't imagine Gillan and Blackmore spoke that much at all. Even when you look at band photos from this era, they always have to kind of like edit individual pictures of the band members and then put it onto a thing. I don't think very rarely were they ever in the same room. I mean, Gillan and Blackmore really hated each other at this point. And it's an interesting period, really. I mean, this you could tell that the management really tried to force it this time. When you go back to the initial reunion in 1984, I alluded to in that video, I think money was certainly a factor, but there does seem to be a genuine desire amongst all the members to get back together in the early 80s. And there's a brief period there around the Perfect Strangers time when the band does get along, and they have this sort of harmonious this brief harmonious period. But like I said, they really tried to force it in this era, and I think it was mostly the band's management that really wanted to bring Gillan back to kind of complete the Mark II lineup to celebrate the band's 25th anniversary, because obviously 93 marked 25 years of Deep Purple. But both Gillan and Blackmore resisted the idea. Gillan didn't want to come back to Purple, and Blackmore really didn't want Gillan back in Purple. So I'll try and put the story together fairly chronologically to attempt to make this video make a little bit of sense. So yeah, where we left off. So the last video we're talking about Mark V, the Joe Lynn Turner era. So obviously Joe Lynn Turner replaces Gillan in the late 80s. They put together the Slaves and Masters album. They go on a tour. The tour is reasonably successful, but I still just bizarre having JLT singing all those classic Purple tracks. I think by the end of the tour, the rest of the band was kind of feeling the awkwardness, I suppose. And the management as well, like I said, they're looking at the 25th anniversary. They're thinking it's probably going to be a good idea to get the classic lineup together. So right in the middle of recording the follow-up to Slaves and Masters with Joe Lynn Turner, it's decided that JLT has to be let go. So he gets kind of a raw deal there, unfortunately. And like I said, the rest of the band, that's Glover, Lord, and Pace, as well as the band's management, I think their eyes were on Gillan the entire time. However, in the midst of trying to record this follow-up, there is another character that comes in to sing vocals on the backing tracks. His name is Mike DeMio. I don't know much about him other than he was kind of in the studio for a brief period during the recording of what eventually becomes The Battle Rages On. I kind of, with the whole Mike DeMeo thing, I kind of get the idea that, the band and the management were sort of humoring Richie because, obviously they say, well, let's get Ian Gillan back. And Richie says, absolutely not. I refuse. I hate him. I don't want Gillan to be in the band. So they press it, oh, let's try this guy. And then, it doesn't work or whatever. But in any case, by the time we get to late 92, Blackmore is convinced after being given a ridiculous sum of money. I don't want to get the actual figure wrong, but I know it was over $1 million. The management, deposited just an insane amount into Richie's bank account just to get him to work with Gillan, just to have Gillan in the band again. And like I said, throughout this period, I don't think they really spoke to each other socially much at all. I mean, maybe the odd passing comment. Obviously, they saw each other on stage, but yeah, there was little to no communication between the two throughout this whole third version of Mark II. So yeah, Gillan comes back in late 92. At this point, the backing tracks for the follow-up have already been recorded. And the other thing, too, so when Gillan comes back, he's well aware that Richie was, adamantly opposed to Gillan returning. So there's immediately this tension, this awkwardness. Gillan himself needed a lot of convincing as well. In the early 90s, Gillan was quoted as saying he would rather slit his throat than to go back to Deep Purple. So, it's you can tell how forced it was. I mean, I think Gillan's manager was really putting the pressure on, saying, no, join Deep Purple. This is a good career move. Da 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 da. Deep Purple's management is like, look, we'll give you over $1 million. Just let Gillan sing. So they're doing everything they can to just shoehorn this situation. It's honestly it's kind of funny when you think about how desperate they were to get this lineup back together, even and just force the band into this incredibly tense and unhappy situation. But yeah, anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. So Gillan's convinced to rejoin. Blackmore is convinced to let Gillan rejoin, and Ian Gillan basically he has nothing to do with the writing of the music per se. He just has the backing tracks that were recorded with Joe Lynn Turner and this Mike DeMeo character, and he basically goes about just rewriting all of the lyrics and rewriting all of the vocal melodies. Because Joe Lynn Turner did write some lyrics and vocal melodies to some of the songs. I'm not sure how much input Mike DeMeo had. Like I said, I know very little about that character, but I know Joe Lynn Turner did write melodies to some of the songs. One of which actually got re-released as its original version. But we'll talk about that when we get to the song. So yeah, just a very strange situation, having Gillan come back into the band when everything's already done basically. I think there's the way that Blackmore and Gillan would communicate. I think Blackmore would talk to either Pace Lord or Glover and say, well, I want let Gillan know that I want him to record the vocals exactly as Joe Lynn Turner did, and he needs to sing the same melodies and this, that, the other thing. So obviously Gillan's not going to do that. He's not going to just go in and repeat JLT's thing. So when I guess when Gillan puts together his own lyrics and his own vocal melodies, Blackmore absolutely hated it. He's hated the album for, well, he's famously called it the cattle grazes on for many years. But yeah, just such a ridiculously awkward, intense, and unhappy situation for them all to be in. But it's a part of the story, like I always say. So yeah, I'll get into the album itself. The Battle Rages On appears in July of 1993, and like I said, it's surprisingly really good. This is probably a controversial thing, but of all of the four albums with Richie after the reunion in 1984, I think this is the best one. I picked this over Perfect Strangers, House of Blue Light, and Slaves and Masters as well. There's still, the same issues that plague, those other three albums are still present here. I still think, Pacey's drumming's a little bit stiff still, although he's starting to loosen up a bit. Not a lot. He's still for the most part, pretty rigid in his playing. John Lord is also still, for the most part, taking a back seat. But again, I think there's a little bit more organ work on this album, a little bit more keyboard work. Not, still not a huge amount of keyboard solos, but I think I can feel Lord's presence on a few tracks in particular. So even though it still has those qualities that I find frustrating from the other 80s and 90s albums, I think overall this is a big improvement. I've always found Perfect Strangers to be good but a little safe. House of Blue Light is kind of ups, there's ups and downs to it. Slaves and Masters is just bizarre, but again, still has some good moments. But this one is it's pretty solid. There's a lot of good heavy tracks on here. There's some good guitar solos on here. Um, it's I found it so surprising actually that with the fact that Gillan just came in after everything was recorded and just kind of sang over top of it, because it sounds more coherent than you would think. The other thing about this album as well that's kind of funny is that there's a lot of recycled material on it, and again, it's one of those things where that should be a detriment to the album. I shouldn't say it really enhances the album, but I don't mind the fact that they're recycling some older material. There's at least three songs on here that can be traced back to Rainbow songs. And then there's at least two songs that are kind of nicked from old blues standards. But, going right back to like the classic period of the band, like they were very open about nicking, stealing other material. Like Black Knight was taken from the Summertime song. Child in Time was that Bombay Calling song by It's a Beautiful Day. So like it's in some senses that's representative of like the original classic period. But yeah, for whatever reason, that's never bothered me a huge amount. But yeah, it's so strange to me how this album is as decent as it is. But I think it might be because it's kind of firmly out of the whole '80s thing. Not that Deep Purple got too '80s, like they didn't pull a full out Genesis or anything like that. But it does sound a little bit more up to date than Slaves and Masters did. Slaves and Masters, I think the timing for its release was a little bit off. But and it's not to say that this is a grunge album either. But like I said, it's heavy, and there's some of the songs have some pretty cool arrangements, and even though it is consistently heavy, I think there's a decent amount of diversity. There's a lot of different feels and a lot of different vibes on the album. Every song kind of has its own little thing. Um, Album cover I think is pretty good. I think I've liked this album cover a little bit less the older I've gotten. When I was a kid and I got it, it's like so cool dragons, right? And of course we got the last time we see the DP logo. Um, the font that they use is pretty bizarre. Again, I thought it was a lot cooler when I was younger, but it looks a little bit tacky, I guess. Um, the weird kind of parchment paper in the background is kind of interesting, but yeah, it's an all right album cover, right? Not one of their best. And again, it's kind of the same thing with Slaves and Masters. I mean, you the bigger it is, the tackier I suppose it looks. Probably looked a little bit better on the CD. I do have the CD, but since I got it on vinyl, I've listened to the CD very very little. Um, Back cover, we got some more dragons and these kind of funny little rune symbols or whatever. The weird kind of like bubbles where all the details go in. There was an inner sleeve as well, but nothing particularly exciting. Just some lyrics that were printed way smaller than they needed to be, but is what it is. And yeah, with that, I suppose we'll dive into the track listing here. So opens with the title track, "The Battle Rages On." Uh, I really dig this. I think this is a fantastic song. Very, very heavy. This is kind of like a classic Deep Purple opener. It's not like blistering fast or it's not a fast paced thing or anything like that. But the riff is just so good. It's got a very clever arrangement. There's lots of moving parts to it, lots of different sections to it. It's not quite a prog thing, but you can tell they put some thought into the arrangement. The main riff actually this is the first one that's recycled from Rainbow material. If you go back to the Bent Out of Shape album, there's a song called Fire Dance. and it's got a really cool solo section. And the main riff to Battle Rages On is was actually originally played as the intro to the solo section of Fire Dance. It's played much faster on that. The Rainbow version is really fast, but yeah, they recycle it. They slow it right down for the title track here, and there's a couple of variations that were developed to kind of give it a pre-chorus and all the rest of it. But I'm glad that he reused that riff because it was a little bit used a little bit too sparingly when he threw it in the Rainbow song. But it's good that he made a full track out of it. I think Gillan's vocals are quite good, not only in this song, just in general. We talked about how his voice was never quite the same as it was in the '70s, starting in the '80s, and you can tell that his voice has aged here, but there's a grittiness to it. He's still pushing himself. There's a few screams that we get on some of the tracks later. But yeah, I think his vocals are great. He does the double tracking thing on the title track, which I'm trying to stay focused on here. But yeah, I think it's really good. Got a great guitar solo in there, and love the way the song winds up too. Just that doodle 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 doodle, and then very heavy, very intense, and yeah, just a great song. Quite dark too, a little like more dark, darker than your average Purple, I would think. But yeah, quite good. Lyrically, one would think it's about the battle between Gillan and Blackmore, but apparently it's more so to do with the falling of the Berlin Wall, and obviously that was a big thing about freedom and whatnot. But of course, the world's been at war ever since, so it's not like you take the small victories when you can, but there's still lots of battling to take place, as we've learned in this modern era. So yeah, track 2, we get Lick It Up. I really like the pacing of this album, actually. I think Lick It Up is a great way to follow the Battle Rages On. The title track, like I said, it's big, it's heavy, it's dark. And Lick It Up is just a nice little bit of fun. I really dig the riff. I like that there's some really discordant parts in it that Richie throws in there. That boo-doo-doo-doo-doo, boom, boom, that one note that he hits is... that one little harmony he does is really, really cool. I think it's a great riff. It's really sleazy, kind of a dirgy thing. Then the verses, it's nice because he kind of switches to the clean arpeggios, but I think it's a great contrast between that boom ba doom ba doo doo and the doom doo 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 doo. Which I'm going too deep into the musical details there. But I think it's really good. I think it's a classic bit of Gillan lyrics. This is not the kind of lyric that Joe Lynn Turner would have written. He would have tried, but it probably would have come out cheesy, and he would have done something like "lick it up" at the very end. I'm done making fun of JLT. That's the last joke. But yeah, I think, again, Gillan's voice is really, really good on here. I love that he's got a great scream on this one. It gets me. That part's really, really good towards the end. Yeah, it's just a great, fun, bouncy track, and I think that it's a great contrast to follow the Battle Rages On the title track there. So yeah, Lick It Up, always been a favorite of mine. We also hear Pacey getting a little bit more loose with his grooves as well, which is kind of nice. Like I said, he's starting to loosen up here, but by the time we get to the next studio album with Steve Morris, it's like he's a totally different drummer. But more on that later. So after Lick It Up, we get track 3, which is Anya, or Anya. I'm not sure specifically how to pronounce it. This is a really, really good song as well. This is very much, I would consider this like the epic of the album. Kind of like it's not like I wouldn't, well, I'm wanting to say Child in Time, but Child in Time is like, the epic of in rock. I don't think there's anything related other than them both being kind of epic tracks. Musically, there's no relation between Enya and Child in Time, but it is really good. I think there's a lot of great drama to this song. Very much a Richie thing. Richie's definitely the prime mover of this song. Beautiful guitar intro, and the sound of the acoustic guitar on the intro to Anya is very, very good. It was very, very well recorded. And the song itself, like I said, the big chords, very grand. Again, there's a seriousness to it. And I think Gillan has also mentioned that this is kind of talking about the post-Berlin Wall era. specifically like the Eastern Bloc countries that were, freshly out of the USSR at the time. He talks about, he makes a reference to Woman from Tokyo, and that, Woman from Tokyo was, applying a female character to a culture. So he's talking about, Woman from Tokyo, they're talking about how excited they are to go to Japan. And Woman from Tokyo is this kind of like female metaphor for the country as itself. And with Anya, the female metaphor is for, Eastern Bloc countries and whatnot. And I think it works really well. I really like, there's a kind of like the pre-chorus where we get a little bit of that 80s flavor, not too much of it. That and that kind of works really well with the, it's a nice contrast with the rest of the song, which is, like I said, a little bit more serious and, heavy in that sense. Another great guitar solo by Richie. So yeah, Anya's certainly a highlight. So right off the bat, the first three songs, as far as I'm concerned, are all, very high quality Purple tunes. We move on to track 4. We get Talk About Love. Again, I like there's kind of a nice contrast here with all the tracks, and that we get Battle Rage is On, which is big, heavy, and serious. Lick It Up, which is a bit of fun. Anya's another serious track, and then Talk About Love, kind of another fun little dose of rock and roll. The main riff is really cool. I really like the syncopated drum part where Pacey's hitting the bass and choking the cymbals, kind of going off the guitar riff. I think that's really, really good. Great vocal performance by Ian Gillan as well. This one was played live quite a bit. This was one of the main ones on the tour. So was Anya and Battle Rage is On, but the live versions of Talk About Love are really, really good. It's funny. It's nice because this is what I mean about Pacey loosening up a little bit when it comes to the drums. I mean, most of the other songs from 84 to now, he kind of locks into for the most part, you got four on the floor kind of a groove, maybe a couple little variations on that, but I really dig the verses and Talk About Love, how he just got a bom 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 bom, and then Gillan sings the melody over that, and then Pacey kind of locks into the groove, and once the backbeat kicks in, and that's a little bit closer to the classic Ian Pace from the 70s. Again, he's not quite there yet, but you can tell he's working towards what he would do with Perpendicular. I think Talk About Love is really, really cool. The whole band's on fire. Probably would have benefited from a little bit more John Lord, but what can you do? Still a great song. Then side 1 wraps up with track 5. We get Time to Kill. This is one that I'm not as fond of on the album. There's stuff to like about it, but the chorus kind of kills it for me a little bit. The chorus is just a little bit too majory, a little bit too bouncy and happy. Down, down, bum, 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 bum. Hey, this kind of sounds like it's something that I could hear like a Joe Lynn Turner doing something. It almost reminds me of Power by Rainbow. Although it's not that this isn't one of the songs that really is kind of derived from Rainbow stuff. The verses for Time to Kill are really cool. They've kind of got classic little bit of attitude to it, but like I said, the chorus is a little bit repetitive, a little bit too optimistic, a little too. It's one of the poppier songs on the album, I guess. So yeah, could be better. It is saved by an organ solo at the end. John Lord finally gets decent little organ showcase. You have to wait to the end of the first side before you really get that, but it saves the song a little bit. It's nice hearing the organ come in towards the end there. So yeah, not one of my favorite tracks on the album, but by no means a bad song. It's not a bad song at all. From there, we flip the record over, as we do, the record. And we get side 2, which opens with Ramshackle Man. Now this is kind of a funny one. This is one of the old blues things that was very obviously nicked. It's very obviously Green Onions. Probably one of the more obvious things that they stole, and there's a little bit of variations here and there. There's some different kind of like key changes that they put into it, but anybody would recognize that. There's some like the descending runs that kind of change the original arrangement up a little bit, but I mean anyone that knows like a fraction of about music would recognize that as Green Onions. But still a fun track. I think I liked this one a little bit more when I was younger, but I certainly don't mind it. One of the reasons I like it is that it is a little bit more keyboard driven. So again, we get a little bit more John Lord here, which I think is always welcome. He's got a really nice solo in it, which is quite cool. Some fun Gillan lyrics, typical, goofy and silly kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's all right. For one of the more derivative songs on the album, I can't complain too hard. Certainly not one of the best things, but it's a pleasant thing to listen to for sure. And there's some great guitar playing on it too. So Ramshackle Man / Green Onions is okay with me. So then the second song on side 2, track 7 all overall, is A Twist in the Tale. I think this is really, really good. So this is one that you can trace back to a Rainbow song. There's been a few, in the 84, from 84 to now, there's been a few Deep Purple songs that I think you can trace the lineage back to Spotlight Kid. I think that A Twist in the Tale is the most obviously similar to Spotlight Kid, but it's still a great piece of, it's still a great song on its own. It's got a great little middle section where it slows down a little bit. And it's I think Gillan turns out a really, really good vocal performance on this one as well. I love that chorus of "That's all right." You're kind of holding that long note over top of Blackmore's very frantic riff. Pacey does a great job keeping up here as well, and yeah, it's a great song. There's some great versions of this live for sure, and like I said, the arrangement to it is pretty involved. It feels a little bit longer than it is. I mean, it's only just over 4 minutes, but the fast pace of the song in tandem with all the different sections, particularly like when we get to that middle section there's lots of different ins and outs that it goes through. There's a really effective key change as well, where they change to a lower key, and it works really, really well. They change to a lower key on one of the choruses, and it sounds fantastic. But but great song. I don't care if it sounds like Spotlight Kid. Yeah, you can also compare it to Dead or Alive from House of Blue Light, but that song in and of itself, I think I still think of Spotlight Kid first. But I don't mean to keep comparing this song to that one, but it's kind of obvious, right? I mean, if you listen to it, they're very similar. But yeah, good song. We move on to track 3 of side 2, track 8 overall. We get Nasty Piece of Work. Really cool song. I like the keyboard intro, and just a dirty riff. I think it's really, really good. I love Gillan's vocal performance on here. I love how the voice fades in and he's doing the scream and then lands into that verse the way he does. I think his voice sounds great. With the lyrical subject matter, I often wonder if this is like the other song in like the like Smooth Dancer, Bad Attitude, all the songs that he writes about Ritchie Blackmore. It would fit the bill if that is the case, but I think it's really, really cool. And I mentioned before about Gillan's kind of grittier vocals around this period. He was obviously past his prime, but there's somebody in the ever changing flow of a singer's voice. Sometimes you get these like mid-career periods where things just line up just right. And I think his voice sounds really good in this period, even if he's not at his peak. That grittiness, it works really well. And with the subject matter on a song like Nasty Piece of Work, I think it complements that really, really well. We got a great keyboard solo. Again, John Lord's getting most of his organ work out on the second side of the album, but I think it's a great piece of keyboard. I love the riff, but the riff is nicked from Peter Gunn. The classic bluesy song, and I never noticed it until recently. They change it up enough that it's almost unrecognizable, and they turn it into something much darker. But really, what Richie's doing there, he's playing the Peter Gunn riff, and he's taking the last two notes out, and he's holding the last note he plays. So you go from dun 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 to dun 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 dun. But with Pace playing like a halftime feel, and there's lots of different little chord changes that pop up throughout that song. Um, it's differentiated enough to be its own thing. It's certainly not as obvious as Child in Time is, where the way they stole the Bombay Calling song, or Black Knight, which is the Summertime song. But yeah, that's kind of a hallmark of the classic period. They always did that kind of stuff, right? So it does not deter me from enjoying Nasty Piece of Work. I think it's still a great song. So we move on to track 4 of side 2, track 9 overall. We get Solitaire. This is one song. This is another one that I'm not as big a fan of. There's something. There's a melancholy nature to it that doesn't seem very Deep Purple to me. I think that this is a very original piece. It doesn't. I can't think of any other songs in the catalog that I could compare it to. But it sounds like it would have been more appropriate for a Rainbow project than a Deep Purple one. In fact, I mean, I could see, I'd be interested to hear if Joe Lynn Turner, recorded vocals on Solitaire, because I think musically it seems a little bit more his cup of tea. But it's still all right. It's a that melancholy kind of music doesn't seem to suit Gillan's voice. I mean, Gillan's like the fun kooky uncle, right? And with this like very almost mournful riff, it just doesn't vibe with Gillan for whatever reason. So that's, like I said, one case where it'd be, I think it's probably better suited to somebody like JLT. But the one saving grace is that we get another organ solo. We get 2 organ solos in a row between Nasty Piece of Work and Solitaire, so I think that's really good. Like I said, there is a decent amount of drama in the like the way we go to the pre-chorus into the chorus, but like I said, not my cup of tea. Probably my least favorite song on the album, to be honest. But there you go. You can't love them all, right? And then we get to the final song on the album. Track 10 is a song called One Man's Meat. I think I'm a big fan of this song. I think it's a great way to finish off the album. Quite controversial, really, but I think Blackmore absolutely detested what Gillan did to this song. So One Man's Meat is this is an interesting one. So this is one that was recorded with Joe Lynn Turner. Joe Lynn Turner wrote his own lyrics and melody, and of course that was never heard of because they did Battle Rages on instead. But Joe Lynn Turner did release, I forget the name of the album that he released it on, but he released the original version. He had his band redo all the instruments, of course. But the original Joe Lynn Turner version of the song is called "Stroke of Midnight," and it's okay. I think it's really cool to hear the original melody and the original lyrics. It is very different, and you can. It's a great way to compare Gillan's sensibilities with JLT's sensibilities, because they're so different. They're like light years apart, right? But ultimately, I like Gillan's version a little bit better. I think Gillan's lyrics are much more quirky and hilarious, which is kind of what you expect from Ian Gillan. And I mean, there's certain lines in there that I almost wonder if Gillan threw them in there just for the purposes of pissing Blackmore off. You get the chorus there. There's the one line: "One man's meat is another guy's aching butt." It's just a bizarre line to sing. But that's Gillan, right? He's not afraid to be weird with stuff like that. The music itself, I think, is great. It's one of those classic Blackmore riffs. So that staccato bit. That's one of those Blackmore trademarks, right? And it's almost kind of like a callback to Lick It Up in terms of this like really sleazy, dirgy sort of a groove. Um, I think it works really really well. It is the final Blackmore guitar solo that we ever get on any Deep Purple record, which is pretty interesting. Um, Another note on the riff. So this is the other song that you can trace back to Rainbow, and this is the third variation of the LA Connection riff. So LA Connection, and then I can't think of how it goes, but the second variation is on Tight Squeeze from Straight Between the Eyes. So there's two Rainbow eras that kind of play with this riff pattern. But yeah, we go from to so it's kind of inverted. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but I mean, there's obviously this little part of the fretboard that Blackmore likes to noodle with, and he got a lot of mileage out of it. And I'm not pointing that out to be a derivative or to speak negatively on it. I think he is deriving that riff from the old Rainbow material, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I still think it sounds great, and it's this is like the Deep Purple version of that riff, and yeah, overall it's a great song to finish off the album. I like how at the very end the guitar and all that goes away, and we actually just get it's just Gillan on the harmonica, and Pacey and Lord just kind of or Pacey and Glover just kind of grooving it out for that slow fade, and when that song fades out, that marks the end of Ritchie Blackmore's recorded output with Deep Purple. We'll talk a little bit about the tour. Um, yeah, and how Blackmore ultimately leaves the band. I'll be right back once more. This is the last video I left, but I gotta bring one little interesting nugget. I don't think you can get this album anymore because Gillan specifically talked about how this represented such a bad time in their lives, but this is a live document from the tour, and it's just fantastic. I'm not gonna like do a full review of it or anything like that, but it's a great document of like the final gasps of breath from the Mark II period. We get two concerts in this box set. We get the one live in Stuttgart, 16th of October, 1993, and then live at the NEC in Birmingham in England in 9th of November, 93, about just over a week before Blackmore rips up his visa and exits the band. But I'm sure you could probably find this on like Discogs or something like that. It's not in print anymore, but really, really good album. So the NEC show is the source recordings for the official live album that came out shortly after Battle Rages On, which is the Come Hell or High Water album. There's also a DVD of that, which is famous for a number of reasons, because Blackmore pulls a big old Moody on the Birmingham show. I kind of got ahead of myself here. So, the album, the Battle Rages On album comes out in July. They were supposed to do a North American tour for the second half of the summer, so like late July and August. But unfortunately, they had to cancel it because the ticket sales were so low. And I think that's very telling. It's kind of a sad situation, right? I mean, in my opinion, I think the Battle Rages On is a pretty high quality album, but I think the whole Joe Lynn Turner thing really, really screwed up their momentum. Not that they really needed any momentum. I mean, like when they get back in '84, like the huge thing is they were already a legendary band at that point, and there's all the excitement about the reunion. So they're really, really big, super successful. House of Blue Light. That difficult second album syndrome, second album of the reunion. I think it was they were still maintained a really, really high profile, but when Joe Lynn Turner comes in, I think that killed off a lot of the diehards. I don't know about the diehards, but it probably it would have dropped off a lot of like the more casual fans. The diehards just still would have been going to the shows, but by the time JLT is out of the band and Gillan's back in, they even though it's the classic lineup again, they were never going to drum up that level of excitement again. And I think, and I often wonder. I mean, it's the whole story of like, we get Mark II back together. Gillen and Blackmore can't get along, so let's try getting rid of Gillen. Oh, that didn't work. Let's bring Gillen back. Oh, now we'll get rid of Blackmore, and then after Blackmore leaves, it's kind of like this steady, incline back to, developing a higher profile for the band. I often wonder if the JLT thing never happened and Blackmore was the first one to go, if they would have maintained a higher profile. It's hard to say. I mean, if it timed out that way, then maybe they wouldn't have gotten Steve Morris, right? So there's um, lots to speculate about. But in any case, like this period of like between like 1989 and say like 93, um, definitely hurt the band's profile a little bit. But they managed to get it back. And yeah, like I said, the fact that they had to cancel the North American tour for the Battle Rages on is pretty telling, right? But they did manage to get on the road for a European tour and kind of like late summer into the fall. And in my opinion, I think the live recordings, this box set that I got is fantastic. You get the kind of disaster show with the NEC, but the Stuttgart show in October the band's absolutely on fire. It's a great document. I think I said this before in the Perfect Strangers House of Blue Light video. Obviously the band is still playing great. They're fantastic musicians, but of the three Mark II periods, I think the Perfect Strangers House of Blue Light era is probably the most polite live. They're on fire in this short little European tour that they do at the end of '93. Like the performances are really really good, and I think it's because there's just so much tension in the band. There's between Gillen and Blackmore, they're not talking to each other. Blackmore at this point has become completely unpredictable. He's basically trying to cause chaos any way that he can. He's trying to instigate Gillen. He's pulling all kinds of pranks on people, the typical Blackmore stuff. But I think what changes, during the touring, or sorry, I think my brain is going too fast here. I really like this era. That's why I'm like, it's all just coming out like verbal diarrhea. But I think that tension between Gillen and Blackmore is a big reason why the live performances are so good, because they're just channeling that frustration into the live show. But now going back to like Blackmore being kind of finding ways to mess with the band. I think what ultimately causes Blackmore to leave the band is the fact that he couldn't get a reaction anymore. I've alluded in the other videos that like my suspicion is that throughout the '80s period, even though Blackmore there was no leader in the band, the rest of the band was very much focused on keeping Richie happy. So that would be Glover, Lord, and Pace. Gillen would stand up to Blackmore if he got moody or whatever, and I think that's ultimately why he gets fired in the late '80s. But by the time they do the whole JLT thing, and then they're doing Mark II for the third time in the '90s here. The rest of the band no longer cares if Blackmore is happy, and I think the fact that he wasn't able to stir up reactions, ultimately is why he ends up leaving the band. But I mentioned, so let's go back to this really good box set here. So the Birmingham show in England at the NEC, it's included here, and it's the source show for the Come Hell or High Water DVD and CD. It's one of those classic Richie moments. So for whatever reason, the band goes on stage and they're doing Highway Star. That's the opening number, and I don't think it's ever been made clear why Richie just doesn't show up. But they kind of get that intro, and Pacey's just kind of got your backbeat going, and they're all kind of just waiting for Richie to show up. And again, they're just not letting him get to them anymore, right? So they just go into the song they give him a lot of opportunity. There's a long wind up before they decided let's play the song without a guitar. And as they do, so they do the first couple of verses without guitar. Richie just shows up, just to do the solo. So he does his thing. puts together. He's in the middle of doing a really really great solo, and then right as he's in the middle of like the fast part, and you see him again for unknown reasons. He's looking at one of the cameramen on John Lord's side of the stage, and you see the footage. He just grabs a a cup of water or a bucket of water or something like that, and just hurls it at this cameraman for some reason or another. Just pulling like the ultimate temper tantrum right on stage in front of the rest of the band and in front of the audience after just skipping the first half of the song. And then I think I haven't listened to the NEC show in a while. I think he leaves again, so he finishes the solo and just like I don't know if he tries to attack another cameraman or what the deal is, but um, that's a very very shaky show. The rest of the show is pretty good. Like once Blackmore decides he's going to stay on stage and not attack random people, the show kind of comes back together a little bit. But literally about like a week and a half after that, on November 17th in Helsinki, Finland, Blackmore rips up his visa, says, "Screw this! I'm not going to be a part of Deep Purple anymore." And I'm not sure if he thought he was going to screw the band out of touring Japan or what, but. Thankfully, the rest of the band wasn't having it, and whether they had a backup plan beforehand or not, it's hard to say. But in any case, Joe Satriani comes in to fulfill the touring commitments in Japan in December. So he comes in pretty short notice, really. It's like past the halfway point in November when Richie's out, and they would have had basically just a couple of weeks. And I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, Joe Satriani is an incredibly talented guitar player, and I mean, learning the Deep Purple songs would be no real challenge for him, I wouldn't think. So they do the Japanese tour in the December of '93 with Joe Satriani. They take a little bit of break. They take a bit of a break during '94. And they end up doing like a spring summer tour of Europe with Satriani as well. Um, I think they tried to convince Joe to be a part of the band, but I'm not sure whether like, he wasn't interested in joining full time or it was like a management thing. He wasn't contractually he may have been unable to join the band full time, but weirdly enough, this brief period at the end of '93 and halfway through '94, people consider that to be Deep Purple Mark VI. And I suppose that's valid because they did technically tour. There's no live albums from this period. There's some bootlegs that are around, but to be totally honest with you, I've never been that huge a fan of Satriani. I mean, obviously he's one of those guitar players, right? He's one of those virtuosos, right? But I mean, I've always been more into Steve Vai, people like that, right? I mean, and Satriani is a phenomenal talent. No one would ever take that away, but yeah, I've always found it awkward that they call the Satriani period Mark VI because it's just the Japanese tour is really short. There's only like 5 or 6 shows in the Japanese tour, and then like they do a swing through Europe. But I've always been skeptical as to whether or not to consider that to be an official Deep Purple mark. But at least according to Wikipedia, it is Mark VI with Satriani. So I'm not going to do a video on that period. I mean, I've covered just about as much as I can in the last like 5 minutes or less. So the next video we'll be talking about what is formerly known as Deep Purple Mark VII, when Steve Morse joins the band, and they put together a very very good album indeed with Perpendicular. So the next video I'll be talking about Mark VII, so that'll actually be two albums. We'll have Perpendicular and Abandon will be chatted about next time. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like, comment, and subscribe if you liked it, but I did not say that because I'm not a conformist. And yeah, stay tuned. You will see me in the future for chatting about Deep Purple Mark VII. Thanks again, and take care. Bye-bye.